Masechet Yoma Daf Gimel. We are continuing to discuss the Mishnah, which said that the Kohen Gadol has to sequester himself for 7 days in the Bet HaMikdash before Yom Kippur, and so we saw one source is because it's is from the inauguration of the Mishkan, where all the Kohanim, in fact, 7 days before the inauguration of the Mishkan, had to remain in the Bet HaMikdash, the Pesukim say. So that's the place that it's explicit in Torah, and from there we learned two other applications to Yom Kippur and Parah, Adumah, and we discussed those yesterday. And then yesterday we wondered, those same Pesukim from inauguration of the Mishkan, why don't they apply also to maybe communal offerings or holidays and require the Kohen to sequester 7 days before those, or Shemini Aseret? And we saw that, no, all those have important differences, so they're less similar than Yom Kippur and Parah Adumah. Today we're going to conclude this discussion regarding Shavuot and Rosh Hashanah. Why don't we apply the sequestering the Kohen on those 2 days, and we will conclude that no, those 2 days do not require it either. After we finish that, we're going to see opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, who says that this law is Derabanan, requiring Kohen Gadol to be not a regular Kohen, to be sequestered before Parah Adumah, the one that's going to perform that doesn't come from the Mishkan, but is Derabanan. And then lastly, we'll see a source that for Yom Kippur is actually from Har Sinai, because Moshe, before he went up, had to be separated for 6 days and only went up on the 7th day. So it's a different number of days, but it is another example of a kind of sequestering before a major event and an encounter with holiness. Okay, so we begin. Ve'ema aseret de prishat shiv'a leyom ehadhu. So beforehand, the problem with the other holidays like Shemini Aseret was that there are holidays beforehand, and it's not a one-day holiday. So Sukkot, Pesach, there are multiple day holidays. So it's not similar to the inauguration day, which was only 1 day, whereas Yom Kippur is 1 day. And so therefore, there's a parallel between those. But how about Shavuot? Shavuot in Israel, in Torah, is also only 1 day. So then you could have 7 days of sequestering the Kohen before Shavuot, and then they'll be ready for Shavuot. And so perhaps the Pesukim, the Pasuk in inauguration day, is a model to tell us that on Aseret, on Shavuot also, we require sequestration. Amar Rabbi Abba, danin par echad v'ayil echad, mipar echad v'ayil echad, apuki Aseret shne elim ninhu. So now we're getting very particular in analyzing the korbanot of each, and to show that the korbanot, which is 1 pod and 1 ayil, is the same regarding inauguration day and Yom Kippur, and not the same as Shavuot when you need 2 elim. I quoted all the Pesukim here so that we have them ready. On inauguration day, it does say that tells Aharon, kach lecha. Remember these words, kach lecha. We're going to see them in a minute. Egel and ayil. So there you go. 1 egel, 1 ayil. Egel is just a young par, so we're not distinguishing between age here. And later on, it also says shor va'ayil. There's a disagreement which of these Pesukim is talking about. Let's just follow the first one here. It doesn't really matter. So that's inauguration. The Yom Kippur, it says, Bezot yavar lo nakosh befar ben bakar lechatat ve'ayil le'ola. So there you go, par and ayil. That's in Vayikra. In Bimidbar, regarding all the Musafin, says there also that there's going to be 1 par and 1 ayil, although these are for an olah, and the ones in Vayikra, one is for chatat and one's for olah. Okay, keep that in mind. But in any case, there's 1 pod and 1 ayil. Here, 1 pod, 1 ayil. On Shavuot, however, there's a mitzvah, right? There's a mitzvah Shabbat. There's a mitzvah to bring shte halechem, where we bring the 2 loaves of wheat, and that's the first wheat that of the year. And together with it, we bring 1 pod and elim shenaim, 2 elim. So there you go. We see that there's a closer connection between inauguration day and Yom Kippur, which are 1 and 1, and Shavuot is 1 and 2 elim, and therefore we are not going to include Shavuot. All right. That answer makes sense according to the opinion that says on Yom Kippur, in fact, we bring only 1 ayil. But that is subject to a machloket. But some say that you need two different elim on Yom Kippur, in which case it would be the same as Shavuot. The Tanya, Rabbi Omer, Ayel Echad, Hu Ha'amur Kan, Hu Ha'amur B'chumash HaPikudim. Rabbi says that these two Pesukim that we saw, even though they both talk about an Ayel, right? Here, Ayel Le'olah, and this also says Ayel, and this is an Olah. So these two are the same. It's just repeating. B'midbar is repeating what you already read in Vayikra. In fact, you only have to bring one Ayel. Fine, so then this makes sense. And that because it's more similar to Inauguration Day, which is also 1 and 1. But Rabbi Eliezer b'Rabbi Shimon omer shnei elim hem, achad amur kan ve'achad amur b'chumash pikudim. There's two different elim, and so these are not repeating each other, but adding to it. Yes, you have to bring a pad, chatat, and ayil olah. In addition to that, you also have to bring a pad and ayil, and these are both for olah. So he has some proof here of the fact that the pad is for a different purpose. So the ayil must be a different ayil as well. So how are we going to answer according to Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon? Filu tema Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon hatam chad b'chovat hayom v'chad b'musafin lapukei aseret tarvayu chovat hayom ninhu. No, regarding Yom Kippur, it's true you have to bring two elim, but one of the elim, the one in B'midbar, is for musaf. That's a different category altogether. The chovat hayom, the one that's a mitzvah particular to this day, is what we're focusing on, and therefore on Yom Kippur you have to bring one pot and one ayil for the day itself. Aharon is bringing them. He sounds like he's bringing them from his own money, for his own purpose. And so that is directly similar to Inauguration Day. Also, when it says, take Aharon, you take one ayil, an egel ayil. These are part of Chovat Hayom, not Musafin. So even though Yom Kippur does have another ayil for Musaf, we're keeping the Musaf out of it. And Shavuot, this is also Chovat Hayom, is to bring two elim. So leaving Musafim out, all the Chovat Hayoms, Inauguration Day, Yom Kippur are in fact 1 and 1, and Shavuot is 2. So we answered that question as well. Okay, now next question. Ve'ema Rosh Hashanah. What about Rosh Hashanah? Why don't we require the Kohen to sequester 7 days before Rosh Hashanah and say that that's the better parallel to Inauguration Day? Because there it's also only 1 day, right? Rosh Hashanah is 1 day in the Torah. Amar Rabbi Abu danin par ve'ayil shelo mi par ve'ayil shelo lapukei aseret Rosh Hashanah desibur ninhu. So here we go. We're going to compare this Inauguration Day, as I already hinted to you, right, it belongs to Aharon. It's kach lecha. It's his personal agel and ayil. On Yom Kippur, it also says bezot yavo Aharon el hakodesh. He has to bring his own pad and ayil. So those are individual korbanot. Whereas the one on Rosh Hashanah says vasitem olah la'erech nichoach pad ben bakar. This is in B'midbar in the context of musafin, right? Just like Shavuot. So these are communal sacrifices. So they're not comparable. So we're going to bring the one that's the most similar. All right, that answer works according to the opinion that says that whenever you see in the Torah kach lecha, it means it's an individual sacrifice you have to bring with your own money. Or aseh lecha mishelecha. It says in some place, make for yourself. It means for your own property. So then it makes sense. Yom Kippur and Inauguration Day are private property, individual pan and ayil, unlike all the others. But there's another opinion that says, even when you say kach lecha, it just means that it's for you, but really it comes from the communal funds, which makes it a communal sacrifice. In that case, they're the same. Rosh Hashanah would be the same as Yom Kippur. Now we're just going to bring this braita. It's a little bit long. That is the source of this machloket, and then we'll answer it down here on the bottom. The Tanya kach lecha mishelecha v'aseh lecha mishelecha v'yikhu alecha mishel sibur debrei b'Yoshia. So the answer we said before makes sense for the Yoshia, because he says kach lecha and aseh lecha are your private property. If it says in plural v'yikhu elecha, they will bring to you. Well, then that's communal property. But in these cases, it said kach lecha. Rabbi Natan Omer, ben kach lecha, ben v'ikchu elecha mishel sibur. Says all these verbiage means that it comes from the communal offering, right? It doesn't matter. So why does it say kach lecha? Matam domar kach lecha ki b'yachol mishelecha nidosei yoter mishelehem. It's as if saying that God loves your donation more than, he's talking to Moshe, yours more than everyone else. The kibyachol, in that sense that God doesn't need anything, he owns the whole world, so it's not like he really needs anything more than anything else. But the point is, kach lecha, bring this of yourself, right? I appreciate it coming from you more than everyone else because you're so special to me, Moshe. But in actual law, it comes from communal property and therefore is a communal sacrifice. We're just going to finish off this baraita before we answer the question. In Devarim it says, make for yourself, you, Moshe, make an Aron to put the luchot in. But the pasuk in Shemot says, then they will make an Aron in plural. So which one is it? HaKesad? כאן בזמן שעושים רצונו של מקום, כאן בזמן שאין עושים רצונו של מקום. So when the people are following the laws and are doing the will of God, then it's credited to them that they are all the vessels of Beit HaMikdash are made by all of them. God wants all of them. But when they are not doing so, like after Chet HaEgel, then Hashem says, "This is only yours, Moshe." Right? Thank you for making this for me, and is not credited to all the people. Okay, so that explains the difference in language. Here, and this second explanation helps out Rabbi Yonatan. Okay, in any case, we get back to our question, which is, according to the second opinion here, that it always comes from communal offering, a communal sacrifice, communal funds. So Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which have a pad and ayil, are all communal, and therefore they're equally similar to the inauguration day, which also, according to this, is from communal funds. And therefore, why don't you have the sequestration on Rosh Hashanah as well? Answer is, Ad kana peligela bekichot alma ve'asiyot alma, kichot alma kadcha samim, asiyot alma asedecha shetecha sosrot kesef. Okay, this machloket was talking about in general other times where it says, for example, take for yourself samim, the ketoret, or make for yourself the trumpets. Even though it says lecha, it doesn't mean, according to the second opinion here, it doesn't mean that Moshe has to buy them himself. It means it comes from the communal sacrifice, communal money. Aval, so that's the machloket only applies to those. Aval hanach, but these cases, Yom Kippur and Inauguration Day, parushe kamefaresh demeshelechahu. It's explicit, and this is really true. This is not some kind of strange drasha. If you look at the context in each of these cases, it does look like, in fact, that it's explicit that these are coming from the private property of Aharon and of the Kohen Gadol for Yom Kippur. Where do we see this? ויאמר אל אהרון, קח לך עגל בן בקר לחטאת, למה לי, שמאמינה, קח לך משלך הוא. If we look back at the Pesukim here regarding Inauguration Day, right, you see it says on the 8th day, right, tell Aharon that he will take an egel and an ayil, period. And then the next pasuk is, go tell Bnei Israel that they will take all these things. So you see that since it makes a distinction between Aharon, you take that, Bnei Israel, you go and take these other animals. It's clear from that contrast that the first one is Aharon taking it for himself, his own private property. It's an individual korban. And regarding Yom Kippur, also it says, in this way, Yavo Aharon el HaKodesh befar ben bakar. So let's see the discussion of that. ביום כיפורים מקדי בזאת יבוא אהרון אל הקודש בפר בן בקר לחטאת וגומר ומאת עדת בני ישראל ייקח שני שעירי עזים לחטאת ויקריב את פר החטאת אשר לו. Right? A few pisukim later, 2 pisukim later, then it says, and from the rest of Israel you bring 2 goats. So you see again the contrast between Aaron brings this, all Bnei Israel brings something else. Lamali, why would you have to make that contrast? If not, Shema Mina, Haylo, Mishelohu. Right? When regarding Adon, this test will take for himself, he is in fact taking for his own good. Right. This says Asher Lo later on here. It doesn't even say Kach Lecha here, but it's clear from the context that this is Aaron's only. Okay, good. So we have an answer for Rosh Hashanah and for Shavuot based on the Korbanot. That's one answer. We're going to bring two more to solve the same problem. Rav Asher Amar Danin Par lechatat v'ayil le'ola mipar lechatat v'ayil le'ola lapuke Rosh Hashanah v'aseret tarvayhu olot ninhu. Okay, so without having to get into the private property, public property, Rav Asher says simply that the purpose of the korbanot is the par is for a chatat. That's true for Inauguration Day and for Yom Kippur. And that the ayil is le'olah, whereas for Rosh Hashanah, both the pod and the ayil are for an olah. Neither of them have the pod for a hatat, and therefore, once again, Yom Kippur and Inauguration Day are the same. So we learn those from each other that you have to have sequester the Kohen for Yom Kippur and not the other two holidays. Ravina Amar Danin Avodah Bekohen Gadol Avodah Bekohen Gadol. A third answer is that we can learn something that is done by the Kohen Gadol from another case where it has to be done by the Kohen Gadol. So Inauguration Day, we're talking about Aharon, had to be done by Aharon the Kohen Gadol, and Yom Kippur also has to be done by Kohen Gadol. All the other sacrifices that you brought for Shavuot, any Kohen can do that. So that's not the same. So that's a good enough reason. Another version of Ravina. We learn the initial service from another initial service to exclude Shavuot and Rosh Hashanah, which are not initial services. What does this mean, initial service? If your point is to say that it was first done by a Kohen Gadol, well, that's the same as what we just said above, that they're both done by Kohen Gadol all the time. So that's not really a different version. Rather, what we mean to say is that this is the first ever use of that space. So the Inauguration Day was the first time that they used the Mishkan, the general Mishkan, and Yom Kippur was the first time that the Kodesh Kodashim was used, because only on Yom Kippur do we have a service in the Kodesh Kodashim of the Ketoret. And so those are also similar to each other. So we have three different answers of why we should apply the Inauguration Day, sequestering only to Yom Kippur and Parah Adumah, and not to any other holiday of the year. All right, so that concludes. Notice that there are, I counted 7 arguments, which is good because we find a lot of sugyot called Shev Shma'ata, where you have 7 statements. And so I think this does apply. There's also a lot, 3 is also an important number. And I think overall sugya has 3 sections. So we just saw a source from inauguration, but now we're going to see another source from the Derabanan. So here's the question, Ki ata Rav Dimi. Amar Rabbi Yochanan matne hada, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi matne tarte. The question is, how many things should we learn from the Inauguration Day? Right? When we saw this pasuk, the first pasuk 33 says, on Inauguration Day, don't leave the Mishkan for 7 days. And then pasuk 34 said, just like you did on this day, God commanded you to do lechaper alechem. So those words, la'asot lechaper alechem, the whole pasuk seems to be extra and seems to be hinting that just like you did this one time, you're going to do this in the future. But how many other times in the future will we do it? So do you learn la'asot and lechaper, or only one of them? That's a subject of a machloket. Rabbi Yochanan says 1. Rabbi Yoshua ben says 2, as follows. Rabbi Yochanan matneh chada la'asot lechaper. He says la'asot lechaper, to do an action that will be atonement. That's elu ma'aseh Yom Kippurim. There are a lot of actions, a whole procedure that we do on Yom Kippur for that. So according to that, only on Yom Kippur you have to sequester, and not for Parah Adumah. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi matneh tarte la'asot elu ma'aseh Parah lechaper elu ma'aseh Yom Kippurim. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi learns both things. He separates these words. La'asot is the procedure, the doing of the process of preparing Parah Adumah. And lechaper is that word alone suffices to say that Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol has to quarantine for 7 days. Okay, good. Someone said today, but I like the word sequestering better than quarantine. Quarantine has a lot of negative connotations, especially now. All right, so Rabbi Yochanan, amatne hada. So now the question, Rabbi Yochanan really said only one? It only applies to Yom Kippur? We have two Mishnayot, one our Mishnah and one in Masechet Parah, and they both say the Kohen Gadol has to separate for 7 days. So what do you mean? Does he disagree with the Mishnah? Rabbi Yochanan is a great Amorah, the greatest in Eretz Yisrael, but still he can't argue on this Mishnah. Is that what you're saying? The answer is ma'ala be'alma. No, for Parah Adumah, there is no source in the Torah. It's just a higher standard. We want to emphasize how important Parah Adumah is, how much we're going to keep it holy, that we're going to sequester the Kohen Gadol for 7 days and make sure that there's only stone vessels in his home and make sure he doesn't touch anything at all, because we want to emphasize the higher standard. Why do we want to do all that? As we mentioned yesterday, because we actually have a leniency against, as a polemic against the Sadducees, we have a leniency that we actually make him tameh and go to the mikveh and do it before sunset. In order so that people shouldn't now take it lightly, we add this higher standard. But in fact, it is Derabanan, and that's why Rabbi Yochanan does not bring a source for it. And so this is answers the question that Joel posed yesterday. Now, Veha Amar Rabbi min Yomi bar Chilkiya, Amar Rabbi Mechasya, bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kasher asa bayom hazeh siva Adonai lasot lechaper alechem, lasot elu maaseh parah, lechaper elu maaseh Yom Kippurim. This word, that what I just read, is the exact quote what we read on Daf Bet. This was the quote on the name of Rabbi Yochanan that learns two things from it. This was the original source. And so this is named in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and we're learning both Parah, Adumah, and Yom Kippur. So how come you just said above that according to Rabbi Yochanan, only one of them, only Yom Kippur is derived from the Pasuk, and the other one is Derabanan? We have a contradiction between two sources here in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Our answer is Hahu Derabe. This one that we just quoted here, and the one that we quoted yesterday, that was his teacher's opinion, not his own opinion. How do we know that? Techiyata Rabin, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Ishmael, Lasot elu maaseh parah, lechaper elu maaseh Yom Kippurim. When Rabin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he was one of the people that traveled back and forth and would bring these traditions. He said, he quoted Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Ishmael. So it's actually Rabbi Ishmael is the one, that the Tana, who said that you learn two things, both Parah Adumah and Yom Kippur. Both of those are learned from the Pesukim. If you ask Rabbi Yochanan himself, his personal opinion is that Lasot lechaper are one phrase. You only learn Yom Kippur from the Torah, and Parah Adumah is just a Derabanan, just a Chumrah, to get the message that Parah Adumah is important. Okay, so this is really fascinating. We can reflect on this for a minute. You know, when you have a machloket like this, really only one of them can be right? So who is correct? In other words, if you ask historically, was there a sequestering of the of the Kohen for Parah Adumah going back to the first Bet HaMikdash, or in the second Bet HaMikdash times? Did this happen? Or was it from the Torah that this was understood? Or was this something that was enacted sometime in the late Bet HaMikdash period, when you had this polemic between the Sadducees and the Pharisees? So which one is it really? The answer is there's no way to answer this because we have no information, right? We don't have any source from first Bet HaMikdash, and we have almost no sources from early second Bet HaMikdash that tell us this one way or another. But my assumption would be that it's really not explicit in the Torah at all. I don't see any reason why people would separate the Kohen Gadol for this, or the Kohen for this. I mean, the Kohanim are doing lots of things. Every avodah they do, every olah, everything that has to be done betahara, right? Not any worse than this. In fact, a kodesh kodashim, might be more importantly done b'tahara. And so we never think about making sequestering the Kohen Gadol, right? We just proved that. And so therefore, I would say historically, this was an enactment of the sages, made sometime in the late second Bet HaMikdash period, and that's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan said. And the derasha that we quote is in fact a derasha that's supporting, kind of like an asmachta. It's not called asmachta here, but kind of a support from the Pesukim for this practice in order to lend it strength and authority. All right, and now we're going to get to a last possible source, which is perhaps from Moshe being separate for 6 days before the seventh day when he goes up to Har Sinai. Amar leResh Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, mehecha kaya laft la memiluim. So Resh Lakish now is asking Rabbi Yochanan, where did you learn that on Yom Kippur he has to sequester for 7 days? You learned it from Inauguration Day. Ima miluim kol hakatuv bahen me'akev bahen afachan nameh kol hakatuv bahen me'akev bahen. Regarding Inauguration Day, anything that it needs to be, that these are all absolute requirements, and me'akev means it invalidates if you don't do it. So on the Inauguration Day, all the Kohanim had to sequester. If they didn't, they wouldn't be able to go and serve on the Inauguration Day. Would you say the same thing on Yom Kippur? I know the Kohen Gadol is supposed to. Let's say he doesn't, right? Let's say he went out for lunch, all right, and he didn't feel like staying there for 7 days. Now, would you say that the whole avodah of Yom Kippur is no good? And he's saying it like you wouldn't really think so, right? And if you think it is, that yes, that's true, he has to an absolute requirement, prerequisite for him to stay 7 days. Our Mishnah says we set up a Kohen Gadol in waiting, just in case this Kohen Gadol gets tameh or pasul or dies. We have someone who will be there. Now, for that, just says matkinin. We set him up. It doesn't say mafrishin. We don't have to separate the vice Kohen Gadol for 7 days, right? So therefore, what would in fact happen if the Kohen Gadol became pasul and this guy, now we call him in from home, so he didn't sequester, and yet he can perform all the mitzvot. And if you'll tell me, yes, the vice Kohen Gadol, we also have to sequester him for 7 days. And even though we didn't say mafrishin, we said matkinin, it means the same thing. By designating him, that means we set him up and require that he does all the same preparations. But then the Mishnah should have used the same word for both. Either say both the Kohen, the actual Kohen Gadol, and the Kohen Gadol in waiting, both of them mafrishin, you have to separate them. Or both of them, we designate them. So you use the same word if you mean the same thing. The fact that the Mishnah uses different words means that it means different things. And so therefore, Resh Lakish is proving that you cannot say it's an absolute requirement for a prerequisite for the Kohen Gadol to be there for 7 days. And since that's true, Resh Rabbi Yochanan, I don't like your source, because you learned it from a place where it is a prerequisite, and Yom Kippur, it's not a prerequisite. That's his question. Rabbi Yochanan answers the question with his own question. Okay, fine, I'll ask you. You agree with the law that he has to sequester. Where do you learn it from, right, if you're so smart? Amar Sinai, dichtiv, vayishkon kebod Adonai al har Sinai, vaychaseu anan sheshet yamim, vayikra Moshe bayom hashebi'i. Right, near the end of Shemot, in Mishpatim, it says that the glory of God descended on Har Sinai and covered it for 6 days, and only after 6 days, then God called to Moshe on the 7th day. Okay, we understood, right, that this is he called him on the 7th day. So what are the other 6 days? Right? Why do you have to say all that? So it's adding those words to teach you other cases. In general, anytime someone is going to come into the presence of Shekhinah, and the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur does exactly that by entering into the Kodesh Kodashim, has to separate for 6 days. So this is a pretty good, right? Kind of imagining going up to Har Sinai as equivalent to going into Kodesh Kodashim, and actually is a good equivalence because after all, what's in Kodesh Kodashim? It's the Aron with the Luchot HaBerit, right? So that is an encounter with just like which came from Har Sinai. Joel, question?
Yeah, question, Rabbi. But then in that case, for sure, the vice guy also has to sequester.
Exactly. That's the whole point. So that's why. Oh, you mean that's I see a question, right? This doesn't help this doesn't help Resh Lakish's question, right?
Yeah, I mean necessarily, right?
Good, right? So then, he would also, because he's going to go in, so he would also have to sequester. He didn't answer the own question that he challenged B'Yochanan with. Okay, hold on to that. We're not going to answer it today. We're going to answer a different question. Wait a second. From there, he only has to sequester for 6 days. On the 7th day, can he come in? But on Yom Kippur, the Mishnah says he could sequester for 7 days and only then comes in. So what are you going to do with that? Matitin Rabbi Yehuda ben Beterahi dechayish letumat beto. So we're going to, our Mishnah is going to follow Rabbi ben Beterahi that says he has to worry about tum'ah from his house, meaning his wife. If he is home within 7 days, it's possible he will sleep with his wife, and it's possible his wife will be nida. Now, obviously, one is not allowed to be with his wife nida, and this is the Kohen Gadol, so we hope that he's not sleeping with his wife while she's nida on purpose, but maybe it's by mistake. Okay, so that could happen. And so in order to ensure that absolutely he won't, so we require him not to be home for 7 days. That way, even if he was tameh from nida before that, it takes 7 days for it to become tahor from tumat nida, even for not only for her, but for the man also who sleeps with her. And so therefore, by the way, if he just touches her or sits on the bed, that's not just 1 day. So therefore, we're talking about his separating from his wife for 7 days. Now, once you have that reason, that could stand as a reason on its own. Then why is it adding anything? Why do you need the Shakish's reason? Apparently, this reason does not stand on its own. It's very rare that the Kohen Gadol is going to have this kind of tumah exactly 7 days. And so for this reason, we wouldn't make a whole gezerah, we might make a whole law, but rather, since already Midoraita, right? We're learning from Moshe Rabbeinu, you have to separate for 6 days. So then the rabbis come and just add 1 more day to be careful, so he won't become tameh either. And we'll get to more questions on the Resh Lakish's response tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, amen ve'amen.